Welcome everyone to this episode of Free Kick on Air. You've got me, Liam, today, and then a very special guest. First one of the season, Bailey Bales from Fantasy Fanatics, to talk about all of the teams and the hot topics ahead of week 2. Bales, how are you going? How's your team looking?
Yeah, good, mate. Not too bad after week 1. Top 500 rank, which is nice, even considering with the unfortunate Bonnie Toogood injury as well. A couple of like a Lutkins on field and a couple of frustrating players. But besides that, pretty happy at this point here to be top 500. And obviously my goal for the year is to get that illustrious hat that I haven't got in the AFLW or men's fantasy comps. So it'd be nice to get a hat this year. So, pretty good start, mate, and looking forward to round 2. Plenty of footy to come.
Yeah, look, I am much the same. It is an absolute smorgasbord of footy on at all times of the day over this weekend. I think we're just going to jump straight into the first game of the round. And right off the rip, I'm going to mention a very important detail. Now, because of the fact that this game has been moved to the MCG, it has been moved earlier, and it has now moved ahead of 5 p.m., which is when we would typically get extended benches confirmed. Now, that's not ideal, if only on one hand, because Port Adelaide have a number of rookies and the Western Bulldogs have a number of players that people might consider trading out. But it is also a bumper weekend for Sunday games. So we've got 5 in total. So there are a lot of extended bench players. So right off the bat, I think anyone that's considering making a trade for any of the Port Adelaide or Western Bulldogs players, just make sure that you're comfortable trading them in and potentially consider holding off on a trade so that if anything does happen at 5 p.m, you are in a good position to adapt and overcome. Right, well, now that I've got through that important PSA, let's jump straight into Port Adelaide versus the Western Bulldogs. We've got one change for this game. Elle Bennett's 413k defender comes in for preseason darling Ellie Gavalis, who has been dropped. Now, that does mean that 4.7% of the competition have another forced trade in their forward line. In terms of the big things that I got coming out of this team sheet, I don't think the ins and the outs matter too much for me. The one thing I wanted to ask is, Bales, if you were going to trade in this week one of Sachi Syme, Caitlin Wendland and Piper Window, who would it be? And factor in price as well.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? I think Sachi Syme's probably the one for me. The role was really good. Obviously, the score was great as well, and she rose up a lot in cash. And what we saw a lot in the men's as well. But I think with the AFLW fantasy as well is the first 2, 3, 4 rounds to get bulk cash quickly is going to help you, especially this year, right? With the first 3, it's getting bulk cash to get these good players in when they've got their double game week. So I think Sachi Syme, with such a strong performance, low break even, shout out to Jaden who's providing all those for us as well. With such a low break even, I think she's probably the pick. I think Window will be better than what she was on the weekend. I think she got like a 40 with a lot of tackles, and Wendland was pretty solid as well. Dropped a couple of marks, which could have probably meant her score was high. But I think Syme for me is probably the pick.
Yeah, I do tend to agree. I think I talked about on the pod this week, and I'm still very much in the same position, just tossing up whether or not I might consider trading Piper Window to Sachi Syme, just because that break even is only at 13. And if you were to just score a 50 this week, that's still nearly 110k in the bank. And I reckon if you would just go 50s for each of the next 2 weeks, I reckon I've made 150k to be able to jump up to one of my preferred targets in the first of the double game weeks. The only conundrum for me, though, is that there are 2 sets of trades I can do it in. One of them involves trading out Izzy Pritchard. The other set does not. Now, that obviously affects my forward target. But, yes, I think Sachi Syme looked the best. I think the conundrum I've had is just going back and looking at what Sachi Simon has done kind of throughout her career. So this is her third season. Much like a lot of the other players drafted, even just as rookies in South Australia, there's a pretty strong culture of Sandful W teams fielding kind of under 18s players. And that has meant that we've got a fair bit of data for her time across, a proper second level competition. The number that really concerned me is the marks that she's taken throughout her career so far. So across this is her third AFLW season and 4 seasons of the Sandful W, the most marks she has ever taken in a game is 3. So I think that scoring 80s each week is probably unsustainable, but I still think irrespective, there's 150K to make in the next fortnight, which I think people that trade her in will be able to use to actually get some decent players in heading into the first double game week in week 4.
Would you try to Caitlin Wendland over to her? Like you said, maybe a window you can soon, but with Wendland, who's got a break even, I think, of 12 or something, so it's around that. It's like even a little tiny bit less than a Sachi Simon, and she was good in her own right, probably a bit unlucky with a couple of drop marks. Would you do that switch, or do you think it's probably not even worth it?
I don't know if that one is worth it. I just think that at the end of the day, it's just really unfortunate that we don't have more midfield positions or some DPP, because I think Wendland and Mattia Breed would both be at least eligible for some kind of DPP. And Sachi Simon is the kind of player that I would have considered actually picking if we'd had some bigger benches. And I just underestimated her capability to score in a proper game. Now, in terms of the other question I have from this for the Western Bulldogs is, and I mentioned it on the podcast this week, but I don't think it remains true, is are they actually going to improve? Because they scored just a hair over 700 points. That is the fewest points that have been scored in a game during last season and obviously this season by a substantial margin of more than 10%. I think it poses a real conundrum for anyone that holds a Western Bulldog not named Ellie Blackburn. Do we think that they can improve? Because GWS were not a good side last year, and I don't expect them to be a good side this year either.
Yeah, I think that, I think you put it on the pod as well, the fact that they took 19 marks and 10 of them were intercepts. Like, I don't think they can be that bad moving forward. And if they are, you just get these players that are playing against the Bulldogs, because if that's going to be the case, they're going to go absolutely ham. I just think that there will be a little bit of improvement. I don't know about you, but I think it's a great thing for AFLW to see them playing at the MCG. I think that I'd like to see the players. I'm sure they get a kick out of playing at the MCG before a big men's final as well. Be good to hopefully see a lot of people get in there to watch that game as well. And I think just with the buzz at the Dogs with the finals and stuff, I think that they will see a bit of an uptick as well, and they'll maybe see Port as sort of one of the newer teams and might be able to get something from the game. So I think they'll be better, but whether they're going to be a whole lot better is obviously the big sort of question mark leading into the next few weeks.
I definitely think as well the factor to note is that wind that was kind of blowing all weekend across the eastern seaboard, which definitely affected a lot of the games in Melbourne, and then obviously that game in Canberra against GWS. Yeah, I think it's a real tough one. I think for me, holding Izzy Pritchard, I'm still yet to have a firm choice. I've got 2 sets of trades, like I said, and it really does hinge on whether or not I want to see another week in some slightly better conditions for her, and even just some slightly longer time on ground. I really do think that I reckon she lost, 8 to 10% of her time on ground for the game just because of the windy nature and stuck on the bench for half of the first quarter. So, yeah, I do think that's going to be one that we watch with interest over the coming weeks. It's just unfortunate that I happen to have gone with a mid-price up from that team. I have to make a choice this week. Moving across to the Saturday games, we've got Melbourne against Brisbane down at the beautiful Casey Fields at 11:05 a.m. So anyone in WA, make sure you've got your trades ready before you go to sleep and have a sleep in on Sunday morning. We've got 2 changes, one for each team. Taylor Harris is out. That was the big news injury-wise of the week. And in comes Georgia Campbell, who I think is about 500K. She played a few games last year in the ruck, although I expect her to play sometime forward. And then going out is the injured Shanae Davison, and in comes a rookie ruck, the 337k Eleanor Hartill for her club debut after she moved across from West Coast. As a result of only seeing those changes, that does mean that anyone who was like me that was slightly concerned by Megan Fitzsimon spending some extra time on the bench in the second half with what looked like some kind of ankle twist. She'd remained off the injury report and has been named on the ground. I think the big discussion point from this is, what do we think that the removal of Taylor Harris does to the structure of cross half forward and in the midfield for the Demons? I personally believe that it doesn't change necessarily. I don't think it changes what Kate Hoare is going to do, because she was such a vital component in their preseason games and in that round one game, playing a mixed forward and midfield role. Bales, do you have any strong thoughts on what might happen as a result of Taylor Harris going out? Do you think it might affect, might actually impact Sinead Goldrick?
Yeah, well, that was obviously the big question coming out, because we obviously didn't like the fact that she started every quarter, I think, on the bench, or at least three of them from what I definitely know. And she did play forward in the second half. But as you say, with Fitzsimon, with that sort of injury late, Harris injured, I think the fact they brought in Georgia Campbell and Fitzsimon is fit, I think that will still mean Goldrick will still have that role she had in the first half last week, playing that sort of everywhere role, but a bit of that midfield, which is what we saw in the preseason. So I don't think I'm too worried for Goldrick. And as you said, I think Kate Hoare she's just a very, very good footballer. And I think she's just going to continue and be the clear number one forward with Bonnie out for a fair chunk of the season. So I think it'd be a very interesting watch, but I don't know if I'd be sort of making any trades in terms of trading out a Goldrick or anything. Do you think she's still a target?
I think she's still a target. Yeah, I still think that what we saw from her in that game, even when she was starting on half forward, looks and the way she plays really suits the Melbourne game style, which is predicated on the speed of ball movement. I think that really helps those half forwards, because it definitely means that they're going to spend less time out of the play, because Melbourne clearly look to move the ball quickly and don't want to spend that much time chipping it around in defence. So I definitely think that she remains a target. But I also think that if you don't have Kate Hoare and you do have Bonnie Toogood, I think she's the number one player that you're looking to swap in there to replace her. Just moving across to Melbourne, they put up a pretty insipid performance against North. I do wonder if the 1 week experiment of Kathy Svark spending time forward ends. She moves into the midfield. Do we think that this impacts, or what are your thoughts on Courtney Hodder as a trade-in target for Bonnie Toogood? She's obviously someone that a number of people started with, myself included. She had an okay role against North Melbourne, albeit kind of missing that extra, 10 minutes or so in the midfield that might have pushed her up into the 70s, which is what I would have ideally hoped for.
Yeah, I think Courtney Hodder's a very interesting one. I think she's probably got to play a bit more midfield, even Hodder, than she did last week, because we saw was it late in the second quarter or the third quarter when she went in there a bit more, she had an instant impact. Like, she had laid tackles pretty much as soon as she was in there. Her pressure was great. I think Courtney Hodder's still a pretty good target. She scored a 56 in a game where Brisbane weren't too great and North Melbourne were very good. So I think that she'll improve from that. I think that the role could be better. And I think that Kathy Svark was a bit too forward for my liking as well. So does that, I don't know if it impacts Nellie Anderson, but maybe it just impacts the whole Brisbane midfield.
I think it has an impact on someone like a Nellie Hansen, who plays a similar style. And something else that I've just thought about is there were a few times in that game where Courtney Hodder was sitting deep full forward out of the goal square. And I also noted that Talia Hickey basically rucked equal time with Taylor Smith, who is typically, which is a surprising thing to have happen, just given how highly rated Talia Hickey is for her capabilities around the ground. Not really a noted forward, though, whereas Taylor Smith is definitely more forward than she is ruck. I think the selection of Hartill means that Talia Hickey will probably chop with Hartill in the ruck and leaves Taylor Smith more as a deep forward, potentially to allow Hodder, Apostle Thwaite, and even if Kathy Sfark is rotating to the forward line, Sfark, the ability to roll up a bit higher and not have to spend much time deep inside forward 50. So I think on the whole, she's actually probably gone up a smidge in my eyes. But I also had her as probably one of the top 3 or 4 targets for people that had Bonnie Toogood.
Yeah, I think Brisbane last week got beat up around the ball. So I think that maybe putting that extra midfielder in a Kathy Svark and getting that pressure on the ball will be something they'll look at doing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Courtney Hodder as a target this week.
Yeah, right. Perfect. So let's move along to the next game of the round. We've got the West Coast Eagles against Essendon. Now, there are a lot of changes in this game. So out for the West Coast Eagles, we've got Evie Gooch, Verity Simmons, and Tess Lyons, the last 2 of which were rookies. Now, the ins, Emma Swanson rejoins, Sarah Lakai, the ruck, and then rookie Jamie Harkin, injury replacement, 300k midfielder out of the Waffle W, joins the team. Now, she's been named last on the bench. Out for Essendon, we've got Elise Gamble, who is suspended. We've got Amber Clark with concussion, and the oft-discussed, the hugely missed Bonnie Toogood with an MCL sprain. So, in for the Bombers, as what I'm assuming will be Bonnie Toogood's replacement, Jackie Vott. Replacing Elise Gamble in D50 is Ash Van Loon, and then the final in is rookie-priced midfielder, if my memory serves correctly, Lily Rose Williamson. Let's just double-check. Yes, rookie. 300k forward. That is very, very interesting and potentially handy for us. Now, for the West Coast Eagles, the big question on kind of everyone's lips is how big a target is what's her name? Hosking, Jess Hosking. Now, on the team sheet, she's been placed at full forward. I'm not entirely certain that that's how the game will line up. Are you someone that's looking at trading in Hosking this week? And what are the reasons that you're kind of pushing you in one direction or the other?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Jess Hosking as a target this week, and not really is like it. And if anyone's bringing her in to be like a keeper and top 5 defender based on last week, I think that's misjudged. And I'd be looking at her purely as a 3-week play, because I like the fact that she's got a couple of good matchups in the fact that she plays the Bombers this week. Then she's got the Bulldogs next week. And then she goes into a double game week. It's Collingwood and Brisbane. So I just think that it's a good play to get some cash. I think there are a lot of defenders last week that struggled. Like you've got your Emery Driscolls, whether Georgia Stas becomes a target or not, regardless, she'll drop a bit. Karen Peterson had a poorer game. I think it gives us another couple of weeks to look at these defenders, see who the top sort of 5 or 6 are that we want to target. And then you can trade Jess Hosking in around 5 and upgrade to one of those. So I'm a big fan. I think the fact that she's under 700k as well makes it quite achievable for a Kate Lutkins up or a Serene Watson up or something like that. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I'm likewise. And I think there's definitely something to be said for all of those games in windy conditions. For those players that accumulate uncontested possessions, it is a massive disadvantage to be playing in such kind of, in the wind means that it is that much harder to get that easy mark, to get off that kick that'll hit someone else on the chest. Like, I think we talked about it on the podcast this week, but what was happening at Carlton down at Frankston was evident of how difficult it was to hit a target, and as a result, how difficult it might be for defenders to score. So I definitely think having Hosking as a target for 3 weeks until round 5, at which point you may be able to do what I call a downgrade sideways, which is just accumulate a little bit of extra cash for someone who's going into a game week who looks to be on the rise. I'd actually think that that's a very sensible trade to make if you can afford it. I think the big question is just going to be who goes out of either it's a low rookie price player in Lutkins or Beattie, or if it is a Serene Watson. That's the kind of big question for West Coast. I think I don't necessarily feel too strongly about the impact that Emma Swanson coming in has for Hosco's role. I still think there's probably going to be some time in the midfield for her. And I also think there's a very real possibility that Emma Swanson does spend time off half back as well, at which point I think it might limit the max number of CBAs. But I still think Jess Hosking booked in for a kind of high 50s, low 60 this week would be pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and just last thing to sort of put a bow on it as well, the fact that in round 5 there's a few popular defenders that people would be targeting. So you've got Isla Sheeran, who hopefully will be back next week or the week after. We can target her for a double game week. You've also got Karen Peterson if she looks like she's improving, and then you've also got a Emma Carney and Nicole Bresnahan. So that's sort of a Hosking to any of those defenders in round 5. I think is a good move.
Yeah, 100%. Now, moving across to the Bombers, this is not the world's most fantasy relevant team, particularly with Bonnie Toogood going down. I think it is going to be fascinating to see what kind of possessions, what the Bombers are able to do. They very nearly did what the Western Bulldogs did and have more intercept marks than they did marks from their own kicks. It was, I think, 28 total marks for the Bombers, 13 of which were intercepts. So they were also pretty ropey in that game against Fremantle. I think the big, fantasy question might be, I think Madison Gay probably going to spend some time forward this week. As a result, I do wonder if someone pops up in defence. Now, the one that's been popular as a rookie target is Alex Morecambe. I do not think that she's going to be a particularly great scorer this year. It took her 9 tackles in a game with a historically high number of ruck contests and a goal to get to her score, which does not fill me with confidence if you're bringing her in. The player that I think is interesting to play off half back, and sadly she's a midfielder. Oh, damn it. I thought she was a forward, is Amelia Radford. She's definitely someone that I think could have potentially been someone, if she was playing and she's been named off half back, who could score okay. For those people that do kind of have a Jean Anscorn or a Maddie Pressbarkis, I think Bonnie going out only helps their ability to accumulate more points. So as much as the Bombers look terrible, I think you're holding on there. Unless you have anything Bales from this game, I'm gonna jump along to Collingwood Hawthorn.
I was just going to say, could you jump on Lily Rose Williamson this week? That was my only probably question for you.
I just don't know what role she's going to play. She's played as a midfielder before. I think in her first couple of games she had CBAs, but I don't know if she's going to. She's played time forward and in the midfield at the VFLW level in the games of Essendon that I've watched, but hasn't been a spectacular scorer, although she has looked better than the level. So it's also a question of her time on ground, given that she spent all of last year away from the team with injury, essentially. So I don't know if I'd be wanting to trade into her this week, particularly given she's basement priced at 300k. I think we can afford to wait a week because the likelihood that she scores a Mariana Anthony style 100 is so improbable that I'd hold off. And if she is playing midfield, I do think that there's a real possibility that the role won't last long because I expect the Bombers, if losses start to accrue, will want to push Chloe Adams and Amy Galos with the midfield. So it's a no from me for this week, but a name to watch if she does have a decent role.
Yep.
All right, moving across now then to Collingwood against Hawthorn. Collingwood have a host of changes. We've seen Murren Atkinson miss with concussion, Tani White for 3 weeks with suspension. Imogen Evans is out, and then Annie Lee is out for the season with an injury. So coming in defence is Selena Carlson. Bree Davey is back from her ankle complaint, I believe. Amber Shute, a rookie, and then Illyri Morris, who is also a rookie-priced player, if I do remember correctly. Yeah, 319k forward. And for those interested, Amber Shute is a 300k defender. Now, for Hawthorn, one change. Laura Elliott is out, and then recent signee, Hayley McLaughlin, has been named. In terms of kind of a fantasy relevant query for both teams, Hawks, big watch on their forward trade-in targets. There are probably two that are at the top of the list for a lot of people, which is Casey Sheriff, fresh off a 67 with 2 goals on the weekend, and then also Greta Bodie, who scored mid to high 70s, if I remember correctly, and kicked 1 goal for. Are either of those on your trading targets for Bonnie Toogood? And which one would you prefer, even if they're not?
Yeah, they're both names that I've considered. I've probably got a couple of other names just ahead of them, just in terms of I think they're almost at an awkward price. Like if you go a tiny bit up, I think I prefer 1 or 2 names. But if you go down, there's and maybe another player or two that I might like. So I think Casey Sheriff, if I was to pick one, would probably be the pick just because of the midfield time. But we know that if Greta Bodie's having 5 shots a game, she's not going to be kicking 1 goal for. So I think there'll be definitely games where she'll kick 2 or 3 goals instead. So not bad. I probably want to see a bit more from Greta Bodie though. And Casey Sheriff probably the one. I'm just not sure about the ceiling. Are you looking at either of these players?
There is a very real possibility that Casey Sheriff is my trade in, if only because it does that's the trade that allows me to keep Izzy Pritchard and also bring in Sachi Syme. So that's the key thing I've got to weigh up. Do I want to target a Katie Brennan and be forced to trade out Izzy Pritchard, or do I want to keep Pritchard for an extra week to see if she can improve in a more normal scoring game and trade into a Casey Sheriff and just hope that there's enough upside there. Add in the fact that she's got a low break even, so a break even of 29. She scores a 50 this week. She goes up 59k. Scores 75, goes up 130k. Kind of, does she score enough in the next 3 weeks that Katie Brennan or the player or the forward that really shows themselves to be the one to have? I can kind of tread water a little bit while still making some really clear, defined upgrades on other lines and get off players that I'm really certain are not going to look good. And I think that for anyone that is playing a draft league, I think Greta Bodie is an ideal pick to have. She's definitely a name to watch. Just one thing to note, Hayley McLaughlin, who's been named as the debutant now, she played 5 games in the VFLW with Box Hill this preseason. Of those 5 games, 3 scores were in the 50s, and the other 2 are a 64 and an 82, playing as a relatively inside midfielder. Has a decent spread of marks and tackles. So at 300k, if you're desperate and you're a Hawks fan, I don't think it's outrageous to pick her. Moving across though to Carlton, sorry, not Carlton, Collingwood. A lot of people, or a number of people, had Geordie Allen going into round 1 last week. If you held her, would you trade her out?
I think so. I think that we've just seen when there's all these Collingwood like defenders like Ruby Slisher, even when Lauren Butler's there, we just don't really see Geordie Allen scoring too well. No, she scored well in the practice game, but she just played a bit too deep. And it was because at the start of the game, it looked to me as though Ruby Slisher was the one playing deep and Geordie Allen was playing up. But then I think it would have been midway through the first quarter, it switched and it was Geordie Allen playing deep and Ruby sort of playing right at the ground. I think that's where Ruby plays her best footy. So I'd be trading. I think Ruby Slisher's the main Collingwood defender you want in your teams.
Yeah, I actually think that, a lot of it comes down to the fact that Allen isn't afforded the ability to play basically a wing role. She and Bess Keeney are probably 2 very similar players, except one starts off half back and then kind of pushes up to a wing. The other starts on a wing and pushes across or pushes behind the ball onto a half back. I think that if we do see the return, if we'd seen the return of Lauren Butler this week, I would have actually almost advised just holding Geordie Allen unless you were 100% set on bringing in a Hosking. I think that you kind of go, well, she's actually dropped that much cash at this point that I may as well ride the wave, because I wouldn't be shocked if she is someone that people are looking to target and trade in a few weeks. But with the fact that she's not got, we've not seen the return, what's her name. I do think that you can. I do think you definitely can trade her out. I am. It is almost a stage though where you could make the argument you go a week early, particularly given her early double game week. An interesting one for people that held, and I'm glad I pivoted to Goldrick once I was fairly sure she was going to play. The other player that a number of people started with was Carly Remos. She's someone who scored well at VFLW level, started well in the first quarter, and then really dropped away after that. I think you could, if you wanted to be kind, chalk that up to a less than favourable ground for someone who clearly loves a tackle. In her final VFLW game of the year, she off a wing had 1 mark and 12 tackles. It's not a great place to play at North Sydney Oval. So I don't know unless, if you've got the cash to do it, I can definitely make the case for upgrading her, but I don't think she's an absolute imminent trade out. Have you got any other names that you've been considering from these two games? I think anyone that wants to trade in a ruck, I think Sabs Frederick is an excellent choice, actually. I was doing some research this week into just kind of looking at if there's any statistical markers that are helpful for seeing whether or not a player might be a top 2 to 3 ruck. And one big thing is clearances and kicks. That was something that Ali Morfitt dominated on last year. And then we've seen Breanne Moody do it when she's been a full-time ruck in the past. And I think Sabs Frederick had something like 17, some outrageous number of kicks last week. I definitely think she's someone that could ultimately be the number one ruck this year. 17 kicks and 4 handballs. That is elite work from the ruck.
And the fact that she did that, and I know that Ali Morfitt only played half a game, or just over half a game, was coming off no preseason. But the fact that Sabrina Frederick did that at North Sydney, and the fact that she copped a couple of big hits as well. Well, I thought she was probably going to come off at one point. She didn't look in a good way at all, but she stayed out there and just dominated. So yeah, for sure, she's definitely someone that we've got to be keeping on. And it's really. I was actually talking about with Tom when we were doing our other show before that. With the rucks this year, there are a few names now that put their hands up. Like you see your Mim Stroms last week, your Fredericks, obviously Ali Morfitt, I'm sure will be better. That was just from over half a game. Alice Edmonds is still there. You've got Jess Allen who played well. There's a few rucks now that Steph Wells had a good game, and Lucy Wells as well was someone that a few people have been keen on. So I think it's good for the game. There's a few rucks putting their hand up.
Yeah, when this game first started, or even back in the original days of Moreira's Magic AFLW, the rucks we went rookie rucks for a reason, because there was no movement ever, pretty much. It was near impossible to find the one mid-pricer that might rock it up, but we've definitely had a decent cast this year. Moving across to the Sunday games, named out for Richmond, we've got Jemima Woods and Stella Reid. Named in for them, though, Tess Lavey, Sarah Hosking, Charlie Wicksteed, Mackenzie Ford, and Isabel Bacon. Of those 3 named ins, Wicksteed, Ford, and Bacon have all been named on an extended bench. For GWS, we have no outs, and named on an extended bench, we have ruck Courtney Murphy. We've also got Caitlin Miller, and then small forward Alicia Newman. Very importantly, Ailish O'Dowd has been named in the ruck. Just a word of warning, though, Courtney Murphy is a ruck who the Giants have said in some of their preseason material can also chop forward. I think it's a positive sign for anyone was a concern that she might not have passed her fitness test. But just a word of warning, Courtney Murphy, another ruck, has been named on an extended bench. She has also been named where I'd expect the 3 emergencies to come from. I would not be surprised if GWS comes in with a fully unchanged side this week. And also importantly, Michaela Pounga has been named in this team as well. So that's very important for people. In terms of the more fantasy relevant of these teams, I definitely say GWS is stock filled with some options. A name that people have thrown around as a massive downgrade option for Bonnie Toogood is Izzy Huntington. Is that the player that you're considering downgrade to make other trades work for your team and another restructure?
Yeah. I think Izzy Huntington's the player that I'm quite keen on. The fact that she got a 54 when the ball wasn't down there much was good. And the thing that I saw Giants doing that I was impressed with, and as from a fantasy standpoint, is they were looking to switch the ball and chip the ball around, which was good. So, and we saw Izzy Huntington actually get involved in a few of the switches in quick succession later in the game. So that's sort of something I'm going to be watching and probably bringing Izzy Huntington in, just because, as you say, I think it just unlocks. Bringing her in for Bonnie Too Good unlocks the other trades I want to do. It means that I can upgrade like an Ella Smith, who I'm not sure if she's going to improve much on the scoring, make enough cash, and get a few, and Jess Hosking in defence for Kate Lutkins. So I think Izzy Huntington is definitely someone I'll be looking at, and at the moment she's coming into my side.
Yeah, I think it's certainly an interesting play. I definitely feel though that I want to, I want people to be warned that it is not always the case that, if you're a key defender, you need to interceptive defender, the ball actually needs to be inside D50, because watching that game, a number of intercept points were scored by GWS defenders, notably Pepper Randall and Izzy Huntington, across the wing. Because let's be real, like Western Bulldogs' ball movement was absolutely shocking. They were just dumping it around. If they were kicking it, they weren't kicking it to a target. Like we've seen that with their marking numbers. So I definitely think there's a world where it is a somewhat inflated number. Now, the switch kicks, I am both overjoyed to see and also frustrated, because where the living F was this last year when we all owned Tani Evans, and I was being driven mad watching them just hoof the ball the wrong way. But I also just want to say that, a couple of switch kicks in the second half of a game where they are comfortably going to win, they may struggle to do that up against the better side. And I cannot stress this enough. Richmond are a substantially better football side than the Western Bulldogs. And it's not always the case that just because you're playing against a better team that scoring is better for defenders, because Richmond, at least last year, were a very difficult team to score against for defenders. And I will just say that anyone thinking, oh, yes, but Charlie Thomas scored a 79, ask yourself how many intercept possessions and kick-ins that took for her to score.
Yes. She had the most kick-ins for the round, I think, out of any player.
She had 8 kick-ins, 100% play on rate. So that's, a comfortable stack of points for you there. And then 14 intercept possessions, which suggests that she's not actually being allowed or afforded the opportunity to chip the ball around that much. So I think, at least for this week, temper your high-level expectations for Izzy Huntington without also warding people completely off, because I think that playing across half-back, we know that she's averaged that 57 in season 4 when she was best and fairest in a side that was effective, that was a premiership team. It's definitely one a target to watch it. And maybe if you do have other places to spend your cash, I wouldn't advise against going Izzy Huntington from an Ella Smith.
If you can get a couple of 50s back to back, and just get that cash gen going, and as you said, even if you bring a forward in that you're sort of not sure about or wanting to drop a bit, bring them in a few weeks. I think that's also a good play as well.
Yeah, well, I won't belabor the point on forwards too much, but I think the number one player to discuss at Richmond is Katie Brennan. She didn't exactly put up a great score in the second game of the round. In context, though, 51 turned out to be, a top 15 score for the forwards, which is, excellent to see. Is she? She's definitely been a consideration and a target for me, because I ultimately think that her run and then her historic scoring capability suggests that that was an outlier game. She missed a few marks. She missed several shots on goal that hit the post. I think she was not that far away from a 70. I won't dive too much into it, but Bales, would you tick off anyone considering in trading in Katie Brennan as their Bonnie Too Good sideways or downgrade?
She's probably one of my top couple of options to bring in. As you say, missed a couple of shots, 4 free kicks against, teammates missing us for some easy kicks. Could have easily been an 80 on a different day. So, yep, I'm a big fan. And I wouldn't be too fussed with a 50 last week. I'd bring her in.
Yeah, perfect. All right, moving across to the Suns against Carlton. No outs for either team named on an extension bench. We've got Keely Fullerton, Lauren McConville, and Viv Sard. And then in for Carlton are Mariana Anthony, Tani Brown, and Meg Robertson. I know that Meg Robertson was a rookie this past year. She is a midfielder. Let me just pull up a price. Another 300K. And then Tani Brown, now, she is a 407K forward, extremely quick player, and she has been named on the ground, whereas, as has Mariana Anthony, named on a wing, and then named on a bench is Meg Robertson. I think also in terms of the fantasy impact of these two teams, I don't know if the ins or the outs make that much of a difference. I will note that yet again, Daisy Darcy has been named in the middle. If you're doing, a restructure that's being facilitated by some cash from Bonnie Toogood downgrade, would you be going up to a Charlie Thomas if you're, trading out a defender? Would you be going Hosking, a Darcy, or a Thomas if you were getting rid of a Kate Lutkins or a Karen Peterson, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. Very good question. This almost comes down to what you're doing with the other two trades, I think. I think Hosking's the play for 3 weeks to get some cash and then upgrade to a defender at some point. If you want a safe defender to bring in Charlie Thomas. Daisy Darcy looked really good considering that she only played just over half a game and copped that elbow injury. I thought she was done for the game and probably for a number of weeks, but she came back on and laid a few tackles straight away, which was good considering
they gave her more midfield time as well.
Yes, that's the thing. So if you can get defender playing midfield, that's what we're looking for. So I really think I feel like Mini Monk when I say this, it's team dependent and comes down to what your other trades are, because I'd probably pick Charlie Thomas out of the three just because I know she's going to be in my team for the rest of the year, but it probably comes down to what you're looking for, I think.
Yeah. I'm going to force you to make a choice, though. In your team, you're getting rid of Kate Lutkins, who you're trading in.
All right, I'll say Jess Hosking because I'm looking for that the cash making play. She's got the double in round 4, and then I can trade to a defender in round 5. So I'll go Jess Hosking being the cheaper one, but yeah, I think all three are good options.
Yeah. Well, I am already an owner of Dizzy Darcy. I had a heart attack when I saw that she'd been injured. Well, looked like she might have been injured. After having just watched my F1 and my team's captain get injured. So that was certainly a disappointing one. Now, moving across to Carlton, I'd say the most interesting names that have come into the squad are Mez Anthony and Tani Brown. Mariana Anthony was the Sachi Syme of last year, but turbocharged because she went up that 350-odd K in week 1. Now, she does play on a wing and she loves a tackle. I don't know about you, I think that that's a big watch for anyone that owns Darcy Vesio. They played on a wing in the preseason, played on a wing against Hawthorn, could not get near it if they tried against Hawthorn. And now a full-time dedicated winger for the majority of her career at VFL and AFLW level in Mez Anthony has been named. I'd say that's alarm bells ringing immediately for any owner of DV.
Would you be trading them out? Do you think that?
Yeah, I would be.
Yeah, I think I probably would be as well. I think Dana Finn was still fine, and I think that even if she's not on a wing, I think she'll play in defence. And she was a bit unlucky not to score a 50 or a 60. But yeah, I think I'd be trading Darcy Vesio out. I think.
Yeah, I think it might impact Finn's ceiling ultimately, or may have a little bit of an impact on the time on ground. But what I did like is Dana Finn actually led Carlton for marks, which was very impressive. Now, I think 2 of them may have actually been intercepts or contested just in those very whirly conditions. But I do think that if Mez Anthony sticks around in the side, it may shorten the time frame on when we need to trade out a Dana Finn. And I also think it brings forward rapidly what trades need to happen for Darcy Vesio. I think then we will move across to the next game, which is the Kangaroos against Geelong in what could be close to, I'm going to say it's probably the game of the round. Out for the Kangaroos, devastatingly, the player that I was actively considering as my body too good trade, Alice O'Loughlin, out for 1 week with suspension, and then in you've got Jenna Bruton, Liz McGrath, Zoe Savary-Ryan, and then Lucy Burke. Now for Geelong, we have no outs, but in on an extended bench, we've got Abby McDonald, Brooke Plummer, and Chantal Mason. Now, outside of a Jenna Bruton, all of the rest of the players that have been named as in have been named on an extended bench. We had a big watch on whether or not Jenna Bruton was going to get named week 1. She's now been named week 2. Importantly, she's been named off a half-forward line, which, if you were to ask me where she was going to play, would have been my most likely response. Do you think that Jenna Bruton plays off half-forward or midfield? And irrespective of your response, what do you think that means for anyone who's fielding Ruby Tripodi?
Yeah, I think first game back for Jenna Bruton, I think she will play a bit more of that half-forward role, and she'll get a few CBAs, obviously, throughout the game. I have looked at trading Ruby Tripodi this week because in a few scenarios, I've looked at like an Ash Saint and a Casey Sheriff as well as a Huntington, the forward line, and Ella Smith doesn't get me to either of those, to get both those two of the forwards. So Ruby Tripodi, she was great in the first quarter. She got a lot of those +6s in the middle of the ground. Jazz Garner hit her up with a couple there as well. I just worried that with this low game time and the fact Jenna Bruton's in there as well, it's another player that will get stoppage points at the very least. I don't know about you. I'd want to bench probably Ruby Tripodi this week, depending on who you've got on the benches. And if you could go like a Ella Smith up to a Huntington and play her and bench Tripodi, I'd be doing that. Would you? I don't know what your thoughts are on Tripodi, but I'm a bit nervous.
I'm of the opinion that Jenna Bruton is not going to play that much time CBAs. And in terms of the time on ground for Tripodi, I had a bit of a look back. Almost all of the low time on ground players for North last week were their younger players in what was an extreme heat game. And particularly in the second half, I think there was a noticeable impact on some of their kind of younger players, and Amy Smith. Who else was it? I think it might have even been a Taylor Gatt as well, who had low time on ground. I'm somewhat concerned. I'm not so concerned that I'm considering trading her out. And just given my structure at the moment and given my lack of certainty with the forwards, I still think that a 45 is probably on offer for Tripodi in what should ultimately be better conditions for someone who looked to thrive at times at stoppages. Playing at Arden Street, it's a bit of a smaller ground. So I'm happy to say that I'll be fielding her this week, all things going well. But again, it's another game where you'll just want to get some eyeballs on it, have a look at the role. I don't want to, jump too early at a shadow, given I think there's a very real possibility that Jenna Bruton's time as a full-time CBA midfielder may have passed with another injury. She may look to reprise that half-forward role that she really dominated with in the final, or at least a game and a half in the final series.
And she'll probably play a bit low game time as well, being the first game back from a serious injury. So, yeah, I probably won't trade Ruby Tripodi out. I just thought I'd mention I have looked at a couple of scenarios, where that it could be moved just because I think you mentioned with Dana Finn, I think with Bruton coming back in, I think that probably the Ruby Tripodi sort of timeline might have shortened maybe a week or two probably than what I would have liked. But with the forwards, I guess it's a bit of a dart throw with a lot of them.
Yeah, and I think it's more of a dart throw than the defenders, where I think we'll have a better sense of the targets sooner. In terms of Geelong, one name that has popped up a lot after what they did in week 1 was Zali Friswell. Played almost entirely on the wing, scored quite well. She's probably the best forward option in my mind between 600 and 700K. I really do have some concerns about an Ash Saint. She's not a particularly high accumulator, really does rely on goals. And I just don't love the idea of trading in player for 1 week in, all it takes is a couple of bounces of the ball the wrong way. And I think you end up down 12 to 18 points with no goals, and then the trade wasn't worthwhile.
And don't they have North? Doesn't Ash Saint and Port have North in like a week or two?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. It's not a move that I love just because you really are locking yourself into a pretty short time frame. Have you considered Friswell at all?
I don't. Not at this stage, no. I know she had a good game last week, but you guys mentioned on the pod in the week that a lot of those Geelong players scored really well in that game. So I'd probably want to see another game from her to see a bit of a similar. I didn't get to watch much of this game either, so I'm probably not quite the person to ask with Frizzle just because I watched the showdown. But yeah, I'm probably watching for a week.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing. She's had this is definitely. I think this is the best score that she's had. Yeah, this is the high. That's the high score Friswell has ever had. Now she was a high draft pick, but she's not exactly scored massively at VFLW level either. Former Bombers player way back in 2021. I just think it's another week to watch, and I probably don't think we saw the best game from Darcy Maloney, who's another player that they kind of look to roll through CBA's end off a wing. I wonder if the scoring pop for Friswell comes from Nina Morrison spending more time in the midfield, and if she does move out of there and spend time off half forward or a wing, if that may actually drive down her scoring. So I don't have a lot of confidence in bringing in the Frizz. And the one other thing to note for Geelong is Rachel Kearns has been named after being injured and noted on the injury report. But I do think there's a real possibility that if she is a late out tomorrow at 5, Abby McDonald, of the 3 players named in on an extended bench, is the most likely. So we may actually see the pre-season popular fave actually come in. Unless you've got anything else, Bales, I'm going to move along to the next one.
Yep, let's go.
All right, St Kilda and the Sydney Swans at the world's loveliest ground, RSEA Park. No outs for St Kilda in Nat Exon, fresh off a finger injury recovery. Maddie Boyd and Nat Plain. Out with concussion is Maddie Collier. In Julie O'Sullivan, Holly Cooper, named rookie debutante Lara Hausiger, defender, and then Bella Smith. So for these two teams, one of the most disappointing performances of the week was Serene Watson. Are you an owner, Bales?
No.
Well, I was going to ask if you had. Well, if you got her, you're going to trade her out. Look, I think there are a number of people, myself included, Jono included, have both Watson and Lutkins. In your shoes, which one are you trading out first?
Lutkins goes first for me. I think that you mentioned as well in the pre-season she looked a little bit slower and just didn't get into it. And you would have thought North, good matchup for defenders last year, and the fact the ball was in there so much, just her game time was low. She started every quarter on the bench. I think Serene Watson can still go better than what she did. I think she got a bit unlucky with a few players last week. A lot of defenders we did see score poorly last week. I think if you can go her to Hosking, that's probably a trade you could do. But I guess probably Serene Watson. I'm not sure if I would have her at the top of priority trade outs this week personally, even as a non-owner. I even half considered bringing her in in a trade scenario where she was the best I could get Lutkins to. But yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on as an owner, but I think she'll be okay still.
Yeah, I certainly didn't love the shift in role that we saw from the preseason and could definitely make a case for trading her out. The one thing I would like to note, though, is she's clearly their main kick-in taker, which I think is a real plus. Then also in terms of Kate Lutkins, I think the time on ground more than anything else is what worries me. It may be that her time on ground takes a month to return to more normal levels, at which point kind of the cash gen will be leaving you far behind. I also would say that as much as North were a good defender matchup last year, with the quality of entries that they were getting this year, I will be quite shocked if they are nearly as good a matchup, if they play in the same way. So just a word of warning, obviously we like to have some data on which teams are good for certain positions, but obviously there is the scope for improvement, and I would not be shocked if North actually become a far more difficult matchup to play against. Other names that I just think it's worthwhile mentioning from St Kilda, Molly McDonald was one of the highest scoring defenders last week. Playing on a wing, looked really good. She's another name to just watch. She could be the Neve Kelly of last year, the player that plays on a wing with a bit of speed, who's named in another position that could ultimately good. And the same goes for Ash Richards, who has scored all right in some games and then also disappeared in others. She was another decently scoring forward. I would want to see another week before I were to bring her in. Probably the name that I think is fascinating for anyone that that went with her is Liv Vesely off the back of her preseason form, and then what we saw, irrespective of low CVAs in that game against Gold Coast. If you were looking to, let's say you've got an Emily Bates, for example, you don't want to go the whole way down to a rookie. How do you feel about Liv Vesely? I think she looked excellent in that game, even if her scoring slowed down a little bit in the second half.
Oh, she was fantastic in that first half. I'd sort of every time I looked up, Liv Vesely was on the screen and getting the ball. So yeah, very, very good. What's her price? That's something I don't have to off the top of my head.
She is 954K.
I feel like if
3K below an Izzy Pritchard.
Yeah, I feel like if you couldn't, I think Ash McCarthy's the obvious mid-priced option that obviously if you didn't have, I'd be looking at. So if you had the extra, what is it?
1.3K. Sorry,
yeah,
130K.
Yeah, 130K.
She's 1.8.
Yeah, if you got the 130K extra, I'd be going there. But I think if you don't have that extra money, Liv Vesely's probably the player that you'd probably next look at. Like Ellie McKenna's a bit cheaper, but I think she scored an 81 against West Coast where she looked really good. So, and whereas I think Liv Vesely can I think is more maintainable for her to keep this going. So I think she'd be my next target if you can't get McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm fully on board with it. I'd say it's probably Vesely is in there. I think Maddie. Well, actually, no, not even Maddie Pressbach. She's far more expensive. I think you could also make a case for Tiana Smith at 1.04 million.
Very good in the second half. She was the one that sort of picked up.
Yeah, I think Vesely's a fascinating option. Now, across to Sydney, the name that I wanted to talk about the most is Hayley Bullis. I thought she looked excellent at times in the game against Collingwood. Now, she's a fair bit cheaper than Sachi Syme. If you couldn't get up to a Sachi Syme, would you consider sidewaysing a Piper Window or, paying the 50K or whatever it is to go up to Hayley Bullis at 425?
I'd definitely be thinking about it. I think I probably would, to be fair. The fact that she scored decent for a rookie, especially at North Sydney Oval, was the positive. It was probably, and it was a good thing, I guess, for non-owners that she had a 0 point last quarter. But then again, could that be a bit of a negative because she just go on a few quarters low scoring, just get you 40? So I think I probably would. She's got I think she's got the tackle upside and obviously being an experienced player as well. And after missing, I think she missed. Did she miss last year through injury? If I'm not mistaken,
miss. So she was at West Coast 2 seasons ago, and then she moved to Sydney after being delisted, and then almost immediately did her ACL.
Yes, yeah. So which is obviously very unfortunate. It was good to see her back, and I thought she played pretty well. And I was impressed, and I thought she got. It looked like she scored more than 56, to be fair, as well. So I probably would make the move. Yes, definitely in other formats as well. I think that Hayley Bullis is a good target.
Yep, I do tend to agree. Unless you've got any other names there, I'm going to move to the final game of the round, which is filled with fantasy relevant options. In Fremantle against Adelaide at Fremantle Oval at 5:05 on Sunday. Ins on an extended bench with no outs for either team. We've got Gabby Beadenweg-Webster, Sarah Verrier, and Ariana Hetherington. And then for Adelaide, Caitlin Gould, Hannah Munyard, and I believe she's a rookie price player in Brooke Smith. Now, of those players, Hetherington has been named on an extended bench, and as has Verrier, and then as has also Beadenweg-Webster. And then for Adelaide, Caitlin Gould has been named on field, Brooke Smith on an extended bench, and then Hannah Munyard also on an extended bench. For Fremantle, there was 3 huge scores for Freo in Tigers 120, and then the 130 pluses from McCarthy and Strom. If you could say one was the target out of the 3, who would it be?
Yeah, Ash McCarthy for me. She was impressive. She's probably one of a host of players I had at M4 through the preseason. I end up going with Ellie Blackburn, who I was still happy enough with considering how badly beaten they got with the good run and early double. But Ash McCarthy was great. I think that her style is going to suit Freo. This tackle-heavy stoppage game is going to suit her. She's obviously had like a bucket load. I think she's had like 32 tackles in her past 2 games as well, and obviously including that pre-season game. Anya Tom a bit. I don't know if I'd pay over $1 million for her just because she's got the Crows, and I guess with the forwards, when there's a little bit of value, I'd probably go there. And Min Strom, I don't know if many people are looking for trades in their rucks this week. I don't know off the top of my head if there's many rucks that you'd be trading out.
Schultz. If you have Tilly Schultz, she's got to go.
Yeah, I feel like if you've got Matilda Schultz, though, I'd probably just go to another ruck that's in this game in a Jess Allen, I'd probably say. But Min Strom was fantastic.
Yeah, I also agree that it probably is McCarthy. It's just I actually think that the player who has the most stable role that I actually think we'll see in each of the games is Anya Tyke, because it was, as I said, a historically high number of ruck contests and hit-outs for Fremantle against Essendon. In a more normal game, the first game was a monsoon. This second game was in a wind/rainstorm on a ground that is literally named after being too windy. I think it's quite reasonable to assume that we may actually see some slightly lower scoring. Another name that I just want to mention, Gabby O'Sullivan. Now, she did not score well playing off halfback. As I said earlier, though, windy games are not good for players that are looking to accumulate uncontested possessions across halfback. As much as she had a 40 or whatever it was, I wouldn't be trading Gabby O'Sullivan. And if you really wanted to go out there, she could almost be a downgrade target for anyone that holds her, because I think that the role that I saw was good enough. It's just that the conditions were terrible, and she still scored above what she's priced at. So, made the 27K. I definitely don't think it's outrageous to be having a look at Gabby O.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm probably something I'll watch this week and potentially jump on next week in the forward line. But yeah, I think that I was encouraged. Like we saw Emma O'Driscoll, she scored 25 in this game, and a lot of defenders in this game struggled. So I think that Gabby O'Sullivan definitely is not a trade. And as you say, I think she's more of a trade target than a trade out.
Yeah, I agree. Just thinking, is there any other relevant names from this game? I know
Randall.
Will's. Well, I was just going to say, before I move across to Adelaide, is a big in Sarah Verrier, Will's favourite, ruiner of all sides she's selected for, just to watch for if she has a CBA role again. Didn't play in the practice and didn't play last week. I'm sure Will would have wanted me to talk more about it, but sadly I cannot bring myself to do it.
And I wonder if John will bring in Biting Red Webster as well. That's one of his favourites as well.
And that's only because he knows how to pronounce her name. There is literally no other reason. She is not a particularly great fantasy scorer. Now, across to the Crows. You've already mentioned Jess Allen, great option. I think Ebony Marinoff, we saw what we wanted to, just with the subtle flag that she did see more of a tag than we would typically see a Noffy get, particularly if Anne Hatchard is playing in the middle. What I'm disappointed to see is that there is no Tia Charlton named in this game. It does sound like she might play a half in the kind of Sandful W/Adelaide team scratch match that they run for people that are trying to get back into form coming off injury. And they kind of named that up earlier in the week when they did the injury report. I do wonder if that still does affect how much we see of Anne Hatchard playing the CBAs. Now, she's named in the middle of the ground, and Chelsea Randall has been named off centre-half forward. I am surprised, Bales. I had almost jokingly assumed that when we needed to downgrade for Bonnie Toogood and Chelsea Randall had her 90% CBAs, that she'd already been locked into your side. What's gone wrong? What's changed?
I still looked at her in the pre-season. I thought, in forward line, I still think she's not going to, again, I'm not going to sit here and say, people know I'm a fan of Chelsea Randall, and she's not going to be a top 3 or 4 forward. But I definitely think, based on the role she played, she could be a top 10 forward. And being at that 700K mark could be a good short-term-ish play, at least. And if she finishes F5, I don't think you'd be too upset at the end of the year. It just, as you say, I think it comes down to when Tia Charlton comes back, because I think Randall had over 90% CBAs, but then she did the Tom Stewart sort of role where she rolled back and took some kick-ins and played in defence. So I'm really intrigued to see when Tia Charlton comes back. That's probably my only concern in terms of trading her in, is that if Tia Charlton comes back, does that mean her CBA is completely dry and she plays pure defence, which I don't know what her upside is. I don't know what you think, Liam. I think I've probably still got Hodder just ahead in terms of role security, but I don't know what you think.
I am, to summarise my position, I think Hodder has a better role security, and for not an outrageous amount more, you can get another player that I prefer on role security in Katie Brennan. So if you can find that extra 100K, that's what I'd be doing. I also think that there's a very real world that the return of a Caitlin Gould means that Brooke Tonnen, Zoe Prowse, who are natural defenders, don't spend as much time high up the ground.
Chelsea Bedell played forward as well.
Chelsea Bedell, well, obviously, in the preseason, I think we might see a more settled defence. And as a result, we see Chelsea Randall settle into the role that she played last year, which was predominantly forward with some smatterings in defence, and neither of which are a high-scoring role, because once the ball hits the deck in that Adelaide forward line, there are that many players who can get to the ball. You've got Elle Jones, you've got Danielle Ponta, you've got Rochelle Martin, you've got Hatch, you've got Noffy. You've also got Neve Kelly, who is dobbing up. It's really hard to find one player that's going to dominate the scoring, and I think that's what you need for a Randall. But I don't hate, or at the very least, I'll be keeping an eye on it, because
she's a watch.
Know that she's a definite watch. She's someone who I think, in the right situation and with the right markers, could be a 70 averaging player, which is given where she's priced at. Because off the top of my head, she'd be priced at around that high 50s mark.
Yes, I think she's 767 or something. She's
maybe
Chelsea
low
was
60s.
Yeah,
so maybe it's low 60s, but I definitely think it's a watch for me.
Yeah.
All right, well, we've made it through all the games. Now, I'm sorry if I've not got to every player that has been mentioned in the questions that we have been given. If you've got some time, Bales, we'll just do 3 kind of trade scenarios, and I'll get you your opinion. Is that all right?
Yep. Yeah. No, go ahead.
All right, perfect. So we've got this one here from Corey Blackledge. Thoughts on Ella K. Smith to Huntington, Too Good to Sheriff, and Lutkins to Hosking?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that's something pretty similar to what I'm looking at. So I'm definitely ticking it off.
All right. Well, I've actually not seen this one, but from the Robertinas, deep dive into Chelsea Randall ? Don't worry, mate. You've got the 2 people that are probably most likely to give you exactly that kind of deep dive. All right. Here's a slightly longer one. Rank the following forward options as targets: Randall, Hodder, Friswell, Saint, and Pounga.
Okay, so actually do the 2, do 2 names, and I'll sort of rank them sort of from each, and we go along.
Okay.
So the first
Randall and Hodder.
I'm Hodder,
which we've just
Randall.
done.
Yep.
Then you've got then adding in Friswell.
Probably Friswell last, but she could rise above Chelsea Randall depending on what her role is.
Yeah, I agree so far. Now Ash Saint.
This week she'd be arguably top with the matchup, but as you say, I'm a bit nervous longer term, because the thing is, Gemma Houghton played deep forward, and Gemma Houghton last year was so good at getting up the ground and getting involved. So whether that's a role shift and that's going to be this year or not, that's probably the other question mark. So I think I've got Ash Saint. I've probably got her above Friswell, just with the bit cheaper price, but I'm not a lot of confidence.
I would say that I've actually probably got the Frizz above Saint. I'm really concerned by what she might throw up in a quieter game, and I do think that the fact that Horton did not score well is actually an ominous sign, because I think we all know that Gemma Horton can be a 70 or an 80 scoring player. And then the final one is Michaela Pounga, who is obviously a fair bit cheaper. Looked quiet in the first quarter and then really improved in the second half, or the first half. Sorry.
The only thing is the role wasn't as much there for Pounga as what we wanted, but again, she's so cheap that I think she's probably I'll probably put her third behind Hodder and Randall, and there's a chance that if getting her helps you at trades and gets you a better player in another trade, you could easily say Pounga's probably one of the top couple. But yeah, I think Hodder's still number 1 for me.
Yeah, we're not that far off then. Now, a question off that then. If you've got neither of Pounger or Huntington, which one are you trading in?
Oh,
423k versus 470.
I feel like I'd still go Pounger because I think she's got more of that capable of hitting the ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. Got the better role for, a team that is still, as much as they did play really well on the weekend, are probably still looking for their most settled midfield balance. Right.
And she didn't tackle much either as well, which normally we know she can.
No. And I think she got kind of pushed off a few. So I don't think it's that outrageous that's one of her lowest scores of the year. Final question. Darcy and Huntington or Hosking and Sheriff? This is I find very relevant to you, given these are names that you've discussed bringing in.
Darcy and Huntington or Hosking and Sheriff? Ooh, yeah, that's a really tough one. I feel like I lean slightly to Darcy and Sheriff because I feel like there's a world where both of those two players could be long-term keepers.
That'd be great. That'd be great if that was the option, but it's Darcy and Huntington or Hosking and Sheriff.
Bloody hell.
I agree. I do tend to agree. They're the most likely keepers of those four. It's why they're not the same trait.
Yeah, sorry, Hosking, Huntington, bloody hell, I'm getting it frigging mixed up. I think the Darcy option is the one that I like because I feel like she's a long-term keeper she could be, and I think Huntington is still a good enough forward to make some cash. I guess because I think if I had more certainty with Casey Sheriff, I could have gone that way.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
feel like the other one, I'd probably go Darcy and Huntington.
All right, I absolutely, yeah. That was a real pulling teeth situation. Yeah. All right, well, sorry that I couldn't get to everyone's questions. Hopefully, I've given you a fair bit to work with. Sorry, and Bales has also given everyone a fair bit to work with before we go into week 2. Before we jump off, Bales, do you just want to run us through your trades again, and then also what you're looking at for captains?
Yeah, so I'm captains are pretty easy. I'm going Ebony Marinoff captain, and I'll probably just chuck the VC on Ellie Blackburn because she plays early. If I did have a red dot on my bench at some point in my team, then there's always a possibility of doing something like that. But Marinoff will be my captain. And in terms of trades, at this moment, I've currently got Too Good to Huntington, Lutkins to Hosking. I've got Wenland to Saatchi Sign, but it probably won't be Wenland to Saatchi Sign just because I think Wenland's good enough. I'll probably go Ella Smith. I think I had Beraldson there at the moment. It was the best rookie that I could get to. Yeah,
I think Beraldson or Annalie McKee are the two that I thought looked best from the rookie forward options. That was a name I probably should have mentioned earlier.
I'll probably go Beraldson over McKee just because I don't know if I want to lock in that trade tomorrow night. So I'll probably go Beraldson for that scenario.
That's a good point, actually. All right, in terms of my captains, I too am going Marinoff. There's a very, very, itchy, intrusive thought in my brain around putting Shanae Goody on with the VC. We saw her score 110 in the practice match against Melbourne. I can't imagine what she'll do against a far worse team in a very, very open ground at the MCG, where she just looks so accomplished already. Kicked the goal last week. I might do that. I'm quite unlikely to, though. Let's be perfectly honest. I would probably just be putting it on a Charlie Rowbottom and just sleeping comfortably. But I'll let the people know what I end up doing with my VC. In terms of my trades, the trades I like the most see me going Bonnie Too Good down to Casey Sheriff, Kate Lutkins up to Jess Hosking, and then Piper Window across to Saatchi Sign. But the other set I'm considering sees me go Too Good to Brennan, Pritchard to Sign, and then I think from a Serene Watson, I would be going up to an Ella Heads, and then for a Kate Lutkins. I actually can't remember who the other trade is in on that one. I think it might actually end up being a Lucy McAvoy or someone.
She looked good. Yeah, she looked good. Yeah, she looked good.
I can't exactly remember what the numbers work on that end, but just trying to find a way to upgrade on those F4 and F5. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this evening. Bales, thanks again for jumping on for your first appearance of the season. It is always much appreciated when you jump on for these on-air appearances. And good luck to everyone. Good luck for all of your trades. And also, as I said off the top, make sure you're watching for that first lockout at 4:30, knowing that teams don't come out until 5. Good luck, everyone, and you'll hear from us at the beginning of next week. Cheers.
See ya.